That's a huge question. It's really interesting to see both sides of the coin. Technology always seems to go bad whenever you need it. I started working in TV when I was 20. A position opened and I applied, and the timing was just perfect.
It is now time for the interview of Josh Grube.
Greetings, everybody, and I hope this broadcast finds you well. Currently, I am reporting from the campus of Eastern Illinois University, and joining me today is one of the professors from the School of Communication and Journalism, Josh Grube. Josh, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, it's good to be here in my office with you. So,
You know, it's funny because I'm so used to, interviewing people in a very fancy studio since I always interview people at the radio station. And so here I am sitting with you. We have our mics and coffee cups, and I mean, it's just great. It's a great time.
however we get good sound is good for me.
Right? Hey, I completely agree. But Josh, we're going to just get jumping straight into these questions. We're going to get started here. So you're a pretty new professor here. You've been teaching since about August of last year?
Yep, this is my second year.
So yeah, since you're kind of a new teacher, how's that been for you? How's it been just adjusting to life, to teaching, and just all things like that?
It has been absolutely fantastic. So I have a bit of a weird situation. I think COVID threw a lot of us into weird situations. So I graduated here with my bachelor's in 2013, went to work in the media field for a while, came back, decided I really wanted to go to graduate school. So at the end of 2019, I planned to come here for 2020 to do graduate school for 2 years. Little did I know, I didn't know what a coronavirus was. I never thought I'd be in a pandemic, but we all learned things through that year. So I came back, and it was a very interesting, horrible situation with the pandemic, but it was so great to be back, and graduated from there, and then started as faculty next semester. So a position opened and I applied, and the timing was just perfect. The role was perfect. So kind of been here for 4 years. This is kind of my third year, but this is kind of my fourth year, but second year.
Graduate teaching, right?
Yeah, so I was graduate teaching public speaking.
So Josh, since you've been just a student here before and you've graduate taught here, is it interesting for you just being back on campus, but now as a professor?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see both sides of the coin specifically. So being here as an undergrad, it was years ago, but I know what the experience was like. And I hope I apply some of that to my teaching to be hey, I've been not just in college, but literally in this college, in this program. So I kind of get it. So it's been interesting seeing both things. One of the weirdest things, too, was referring to the other faculty by their first names. Because you get so used to, Dr. So-and-so, and oh, I should use first names now. We're equal faculty, so.
Well, Josh, I'm glad to hear that you're adjusting well. Let me tell you, we here, just in the communications department, I guess as students, are all so glad to have you here. You're such a great guy. Just having you in classes has been such a pleasure. But I kind of want to switch gears a little bit from you being a teacher, because I kind of want to talk a little bit about your experience in media, since I know that you've been very involved in radio, working at stations such as 97.5 WHMS and Classic Hits 107.9 WKIO. So could you tell me a little bit about what you did for these stations?
Yeah, so radio specifically.
Yeah.
So with the radio experience, my main focus was always video. As soon as I got into college, I wanted to do anything in the video world, but I love music. I love radio too. I'm just kind of into all media. So I took 2 radio courses at Parkland College. I was a transfer student. So before I came to EIU, I took 2 radio courses. So I volunteered with the radio station 88.7 out of Champaign for years. Even after I graduated from Eastern, I still volunteered there. After graduating Eastern, I worked about 6 months at WDWS, which was the AM station. There's 3 stations that are ran in that building. So WDWS was the AM news talk, was the main thing, but there's also the Light Rock 97.5 and Classic Hits WKIO. Unfortunately, since that was just a part-time job, I didn't get an incredible amount of experience there. So as soon as a full-time position opened up in television, I ended up quitting there just to focus full time. But I was doing the 2 part-time roles at that time. But it was really fun. So most of the work was on the AM station. I think they were the only station in the area that had an announcer 24/7. We would read like weather reports. The main thing you would be doing that took a lot of work is you would board operate sporting events. So they would have a remote crew at sporting events for the Illini, and you would board op, which means putting on their channel, making sure that all the technology is working the way it's supposed to, then switching to commercial breaks when you need to, and then getting us back on regular programming. Also recorded they're called day parts, recorded the clips for the classic rock station and then the light rock station. So recorded that kind of in an overnight shift. So it would air for hours until the main program came in. I think at like 8 a.m. or 6 a.m. I can't remember exactly when. But it's an interesting way to do radio when it's not live, where you're just sitting in a booth and like you have all these little like basically like empty parts on a timeline that you're like, well, that was Anna Kendrick with Cups. Coming up next, we have blah, blah, blah. That dates how long ago this was. That was like the new song then. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It sounds like fun. And I mean, it's very interesting because I feel like radio as a whole has been very heavily shifting towards voice tracking and pre-recording your segments. So getting to hear about all the stuff that you've gotten to do live is so interesting to me. And also, just from past conversations that we've had, you've told me a little bit about how you've even had like local bands come in and perform live in studio.
Yeah, most of the wild stuff I did was at the volunteer station. So the beautiful thing about non-commercial radio is that you can really be focused on that local community. There's no corporate interest, right? So what we really did at Parkland Station 88.7, it was an indie alternative station, and there was a huge music scene in Champaign at the time. So we were really trying to be as engaged as part of that music scene as possible. So I had a sponsored radio show for a few years called TGIF, where sometimes it would just be me and a co-host talking about stuff, talking about new music, because new music releases Fridays. But as often as possible, I'd like to get bands in there to perform. The radio director used to be like, don't put a full band setup in there, go acoustic. But I have had them set up a full drum set in there before, and like kind of, it's weird, like live mixing, and then had bands perform their entire new album live in the studio. And studios aren't very huge. So like it was really cool just having like such a tight space of bands just showing their art and being able to express that to their local community. It's just such an awesome resource to have in a community.
I completely agree. And I think that's one of the things I love so much about radio is that it is so local, and it appeals so much to a local community. I mean, the fact that you were able to get a band to just come in, or local bands for that matter, to come into your studio and perform just on the air is so cool to me. And it's just, I love how much radio can really help build a community. But now I kind of want to switch gears a little bit away from radio and into another form of media that you have some experience in, and that's news. So I know you've done some work for WCIA, and I know you've done some work for KOKI Fox 23. So could you just tell me a little bit about what you did for these news stations, kind of similarly for what we did with the radio?
Yeah, so that was really the biggest part of my, I guess you'd say, like standard professional career. So while I was going to Eastern as an undergrad, I was working part-time at WCIA, the CBS affiliate in Champaign. Started out there running cameras on the weekends, ended up learning all the different parts of the production behind the scenes, became a newscast director. So sitting in the control room with the headset, punching the buttons, like making sure the right things are hitting air, being the communicator with the producers, making sure that the best product gets on the air. Also wearing the headset and yelling at people, yelling at your whole crew, making sure they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I did the newscast directing there for 3 years, and then it took me to Tulsa. I moved to a Fox affiliate in Tulsa for 3 years, where I also was a newscast director. So I spent about 6 years directing newscasts, which is kind of the core of my professional media career, I guess you could say. It's a really interesting position. do miss it sometimes.
Now that sounds very, very interesting. You know, I do have a little bit of experience with news. I did do some work here at Newswatch, and I thought it was a pretty cool experience. I thought it was pretty fun. But one of the things I want to kind of ask you about is just through my research about news, and I guess this goes for kind of journalism as a whole, but do you think that working in news is pretty stressful?
News is incredibly stressful. So it was really interesting coming back to the academic world of like, not that we don't have our stresses in college, but with news, it kind of feels like there's always a constant deadline, right? You're always, when you're on the clock, you're always rushing to do the next thing. There's always another newscast to do. So when I worked mornings at Channel 3, for example, we went on air for 5 continuous hours in the morning. From 5 a.m. to from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. It was just constant news, and then we had a half hour at noon. When I worked in Tulsa in the evenings, we had in a standard day we had a full 90 minutes in the early in the afternoon, and then a full 90 minutes at night. So like there's always that next big thing to be working to, and breaking news always happens, and technology always seems to go bad whenever you need it. You know, in that last minute, like something crashes or some file's corrupted, and it's always being able to work under like a high kind of stress and constant rushing. So one thing I say now that I'm out of the industry, I'm like, unless I'm ever in a life or death situation, or if I'm doing something where I like somebody's life is in my hands, I'm done rushing. I rushed for 9 years in the media world, in the news world, where it's like go, 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 go. I'll take things at a appropriate pace, you know, at a comfortable pace.
You know, Josh, just hearing you tell me about that news, it sounds incredibly stressful. And, you know, I totally don't blame you for not wanting to rush after that. But hearing you talk about not just the news, but also the radio, it's so clear to me that media is something that you're just so passionate about. So I kind of want to get your opinion on something. I'm just curious, what do you think is in store for the future of news? Because I feel like the world has been very shifting to a social media kind of landscape, and it's something we have touched on in your mass comm class. So I'm just curious, getting to hear it now, what do you think is in store for the future of news?
That's a huge question. So obviously, just playing by the numbers, obviously less and less people are watching standard broadcast television. Less and less people are listening to standard broadcast radio. So what a lot of media, what a lot of news companies are doing is they're really trying to make that transition into more web-based content. So I hope that transition will be as smooth as possible, as more people end up going for the news online. And news as a concept, not really an industry, is such an interesting thing now, where if I hear of some major event going on, the first thing I do is like I open up Twitter or X.com to see what people are saying, to see what's going on. I'll Google and just see like, you know, a few news sites, see what they're thinking about it. That reflex of turning on the TV for it is kind of gone. I mean, we don't really do, unless it's something super local and I want to see what the live thing is. That reflex feels gone to a lot of people, and especially the younger generation. I started working in TV when I was 20, and none of my friends, nobody I knew actually watched TV news when I was 20 in 2011. It's 2023, you know, so now those people are in their 30s and they're still not watching the news. So the way we get news has changed a lot, and I see it all pretty much going online in new ways. Kind of concerning. I'm interested to see what happens. It's an incredibly important service that I wish people pay a close amount of attention to. We need to know what's going on in our communities. We need to have dedicated journalists that are fighting the good fight to, you know, hold people in power accountable, tell what they find is the truest telling of events they can. So
Well, thank you for that, Josh, because that was seriously a great answer. I know you said that was a very intense question, but I think you did a really great job of unpacking it. And I think it really is interesting just to see how much of an impact social media is having on just news and the landscape. And even as somebody who's going into radio, it's such an audio medium, but you can't just be knowing about radio. You can't just know about audio. You also have to know how to film. You have to know how to market things to social media. The world is just making this big shift to social media. So hearing you get to talk about this, not only is it something that you're passionate about, but something that you're very knowledgeable about. It's very, very interesting to me. And honestly, Josh, this whole conversation was so interesting for me. So once again, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for letting me come in and interview today. And thank you for coming on. It was a great time.
Thanks for interviewing me. Yeah, this was fun.
Well, hey, it was an absolute pleasure. So once again, thank you so much, Josh. It was a great pleasure getting to come on and talk to you. So once again, I will say, from the campus of Eastern Illinois University, I'm Ryan Beavers. Goodbye, everybody.